The first thing you need to know about betrayal is that it always comes from the people you trust most. The second thing is that it usually starts with something small: a lie about working late, a credit card statement that doesn't add up, or in my case, finding my wife's burner phone buzzing with messages at 2 in the morning. My name is Nathan Parker, but everyone calls me Nate. I'm 38, a former paramedic turned security consultant in Millfield, Ohio, one of those mid-sized Midwest towns where everyone knows your business before you do. I've got the kind of job that makes people uncomfortable at parties. When you tell someone you install security systems and investigate insurance fraud, they either think you're boring or assume you're spying on them. Both assumptions work in my favor. I should have seen it coming with Heather. My wife of 12 years had been acting strange for months, distant, secretive, always whispering with her twin sister Missy about things that stopped the moment I walked into the room. The girls' nights out became more frequent, and she started dressing like she was trying to impress someone who wasn't me. But the real red flag should have been Jordan Mason. Jordan was the kind of guy who peaked in high school and spent the next 15 years trying to prove he still had it. At 33, he was all muscles, attitude, and a cherry red Camaro that he revved like a teenager every time he drove down our street. He worked maintenance at Millfield General Hospital, the same place where Heather handled HR. Convenient. The morning everything started to unravel, I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee and watching Mrs. Fenton across the street water her petunias. She was our neighborhood's unofficial surveillance system, a 65-year-old widow who knew everyone's schedule better than they did. She caught my eye and pointed toward the Hendersons' house, where someone had keyed a long, jagged scratch down the side of my Honda Civic. "Saw that muscle car idling out here around midnight," she called across the street. "Engine was loud enough to wake the dead." I walked over to examine the damage. The scratch was deliberate, deep enough to require a complete repaint. This wasn't random vandalism. This was personal. That afternoon, I drove to the hospital where both Heather and Jordan worked. I found Jordan in the maintenance break room, sitting with two other guys, talking loud about some woman he'd been helping out with her personal problems. "Jordan," I said, stepping into the room. The conversation stopped immediately. He looked up with that cocky smile he wore like armor. Well, Nate Parker. What brings you to my office?" "Someone keyed my car last night." "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Jordan stood up slowly, making sure I noticed his 6-foot frame and gym-built shoulders. "That's a serious accusation, man. You got any proof?" "I've got a witness who saw your car." "My car?" he laughed, looking at his buddies. "Lot of red Camaros in this town, Nate. Maybe you should be more careful where you park." I stepped closer, close enough that he had to look up slightly to meet my eyes. People forget that security work isn't just about cameras and alarms. Sometimes you need to handle situations physically. I'd learned a few things in my paramedic days about reading people, about pressure points, about making someone very uncomfortable without laying a finger on them. "Here's the thing, Jordan," I said quietly. "I know exactly where my car was parked. I know what time it happened. And I know you've been spending a lot of time on my street lately. So let me be clear. If anything else happens to my property, I'm not going to come here and ask polite questions. We'll handle it a different way." Jordan's smile faltered. His buddies were suddenly very interested in their lunch. I could see him calculating whether he wanted to escalate this in front of witnesses. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Sure you don't." I smiled and stepped back. "Have a great day, Jordan. Say hi to my wife for me." I left him standing there, jaw clenched, trying to figure out if I'd just threatened him or simply made conversation. That night, Heather was in the shower when her purse fell over on the kitchen counter, spilling contents across the floor. As I bent to pick everything up, a phone I'd never seen before skittered under the refrigerator. Not her regular iPhone. This was a cheap Android with a cracked screen. My hands were shaking as I powered it on. No lock screen. The message history made my stomach drop. "Can't wait for tonight. Nate's working late again. Heather. Your sister coming too? Unknown number." Of course, Missy loves our little parties. She says Nate's too boring to figure it out anyway. Heather, good thing. Would hate for him to ruin our fun. See you at 8. Unknown number. I scrolled up. Weeks of messages, months, photos I couldn't unsee, plans made around my schedule, my wife, my sister-in-law, and someone who had to be Jordan, treating me like a joke. The shower was still running upstairs. I took pictures of everything with my phone, then slid the burner back under the refrigerator where it had fallen. When Heather came downstairs 20 minutes later, hair wrapped in a towel, she found me sitting at the kitchen table with a beer. "You're home early," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Slow day." I took a long drink. "How was work?" "Fine. Same as always." She started gathering her purse contents from the counter. "I'm going out with Missy tonight. Sister time." "Of course you are." I watched her freeze. "Have fun." She looked at me then, searching my face for something. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect, Heather. Absolutely perfect." That night after she left, I sat in my dark living room and planned. I'd spent 12 years being the nice guy, the understanding husband, the man who trusted his wife and gave her space. I'd been the paramedic who saved lives, the security consultant who protected other people's property and peace of mind, but nobody had been protecting mine. Mrs. Fenton was right about one thing. The Camaro was loud enough to wake the dead. And as I listened to it rumble down my street at 2 a.m., bringing my wife home from her sister time, I realized something important. It was time to wake up. 8 weeks. That's how long I spent gathering evidence, documenting patterns, and building my case like the security professional I was. 8 weeks of watching my wife lie to my face while she planned my destruction with her sister and her lover. The confrontation came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in my home office, reviewing security footage from a client's warehouse, when Heather burst through the door with Missy right behind her. My sister-in-law was practically vibrating with excitement, like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. "We need to talk," Heather announced, crossing her arms. I saved my work and turned around. "Good morning to you too." "Hi, Missy." Missy didn't respond. She was too busy scanning my office, probably cataloging what she thought she could take. Missy Klein had always been trouble, the kind of woman who borrowed money she never paid back, who showed up uninvited and stayed too long, who treated other people's marriages like her personal entertainment. She was Heather's twin, but where Heather had learned to hide her selfishness behind a professional smile, Missy wore hers like a badge of honor. "This isn't working anymore," Heather said. "Us. This marriage. You know it, and I know it." "Do I?" I leaned back in my chair. "Tell me what I know, Heather. Don't play dumb. You've been distant for months, cold, suspicious. You're planning to leave anyway, when we can all see it." I looked at Missy, who was nodding enthusiastically. "We can all see it? Who's we, exactly?" "Everyone who cares about Heather," Missy said. "Everyone who's watched you check out of this marriage." "Interesting perspective." I stood up slowly. "And I suppose you two have discussed what happens next." "You need to move out," Heather said. "Today. I've already talked to a lawyer." "Have you now?" I walked to my filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. "That's funny because I've been talking to one too." Heather's confidence flickered. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know about Jordan." I opened the folder and pulled out printed screenshots from the burner phone. "I know about your sister time. I know about the parties you've been having while I work late." The color drained from Heather's face, but Missy stepped forward aggressively. "You've been spying on us? You sick freak." "I've been protecting myself," I said calmly, which, as it turns out, was a smart move. "Those messages don't prove anything," Heather said, but her voice was shaking. "Don't they?" I pulled out another set of papers. "How about these credit card statements? The ones showing charges at hotels I've never been to. Or these bank records showing cash withdrawals I never made." Missy grabbed for the papers, but I pulled them back. "Careful, Missy. Wouldn't want you to damage evidence of fraud. You can't prove I took anything." "Actually, I can," I smiled. "Amazing what pawn shop security cameras pick up these days. Did you know they're required to photograph everything they buy, including my grandmother's wedding ring that went missing last month?" Heather stared at her sister. "Missy, what is he talking about?" "He's lying. He's trying to turn us against each other." "Am I?" I pulled out a final document. "This is a police report I filed yesterday. theft, identity fraud, and forgery. Seems someone's been very busy with credit cards that don't belong to them. The room went dead silent. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Fenton pretending to tend her garden while obviously listening to every word. "You bastard," Missy whispered. "You set me up. I documented your crimes. There's a difference." "Missy," Heather said slowly, "what did you do?" "What I had to do. You were never going to leave him on your own. You needed a push. By stealing from us? By making sure you had the money to start over. Those loans I took out in your name, that was for you." Heather's face went white. "What loans?" I watched the realization hit her like a physical blow. Her sister hadn't just been encouraging her affair, she'd been systematically destroying Heather's financial life to force the situation. "Missy," Heather breathed, "how much?" "It doesn't matter. We'll figure it out." "How much?" Missy looked at the floor. 47,000. Heather sat down hard in my desk chair. $47,000. In my name. The plan was working. You were finally ready to dump him. By destroying my credit? By making me a criminal? "You're not a criminal, I am," Missy was crying now. "And he called the cops on me. Your own husband turned me in." "Ex-husband," I corrected. "As of this morning." Both women stared at me. "I filed divorce papers an hour ago. Heather, you'll be served this afternoon. I'm citing adultery, fraud, and irreconcilable differences. I'm keeping the house, the car, and everything else that hasn't been pawned or stolen." "You can't do that." "I can, and I did. I've also changed the locks and canceled your credit cards. The ones that weren't already maxed out by your sister, anyway." A car door slammed outside. Through the window, we could see Detective Ray Hall walking up my front path with two uniformed officers. "Right on time," I said. Missy bolted for the back door, but I'd locked it earlier. She spun around like a trapped animal. "Missy Klein?" Detective Hall stepped into my office. "You're under arrest for identity theft, credit card fraud, and grand larceny. This is harassment. He's doing this because his wife left him." "Actually," Detective Hall said, snapping handcuffs on her wrists, "he's doing this because you committed multiple felonies. You have the right to remain silent." As they read Missy her rights, Heather sat frozen in my chair, staring at the financial documents spread across my desk. "How could you do this to my sister?" she whispered. "How could she do this to you?" I replied. "Or did you think those loans were going to pay themselves?" "She was trying to help me. She was trying to help herself. To your money, your credit, and your life. The affair with Jordan was just entertainment." Detective Hall finished with Missy and turned to me. "We'll need you to come in later this week to sign some additional paperwork." "Not a problem." As they led Missy away, she screamed over her shoulder, "This isn't over. You think you're so smart, but you don't know everything." The front door closed behind them. The house was suddenly impossibly quiet. Heather looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "I loved you once." "I know," I said. "I loved you too. Past tense. What am I supposed to do now? Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore, Heather. You made your choice when you decided I was too boring to figure out what you were doing." I walked to the door. "You've got an hour to pack whatever you need. After that, anything left behind becomes my property." "Nate, please, we can work this out." "No, we can't. Some things can't be fixed." I paused in the doorway. "Oh, and Heather, you might want to call Jordan. Something tells me he's going to be looking for a new job very soon." I left her sitting there, surrounded by the evidence of her sister's betrayal and her own destruction. Mrs. Fenton waved at me from her garden as I walked to my car. "Everything all right, dear?" she called. "Everything's perfect, Mrs. Fenton. Absolutely perfect." Jordan Mason made his next move exactly as I predicted, with all the subtlety of his cherry-red Camaro. 3 days after Missy's arrest, he was waiting for me in the hospital parking lot when I finished installing a new security system in the pediatric ward. "We need to talk," he said, stepping out from behind a van. "Do we?" I kept walking toward my car, but I was already calculating distances and exit routes, old habits from my paramedic days. Always know where the nearest help is, always have an escape plan. "You ruined everything." He fell into step beside me, trying to use his size to intimidate. "Heather's a mess. Her sister's in jail. And now the hospital's asking questions about our relationship." "Your relationship," I corrected. "I'm not part of it anymore." You know what I mean. I stopped walking and turned to face him. We were in full view of the hospital's main entrance, with people coming and going constantly. Jordan was angry, but he wasn't stupid enough to start something here. Actually, I don't know what you mean. Why don't you explain it to me? You think you're so clever, don't you? Getting her sister arrested, filing for divorce, making Heather look like the bad guy. Heather made herself look like the bad guy. I just documented it. She was going to leave you anyway. Then, she should have left me before she started sleeping with you. I smiled. But I guess patience isn't your strong suit. Jordan stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the vein pulsing in his forehead. You want to know the truth? She never loved you. Not really. She told me you were boring in bed, boring to talk to, boring to be around. She stayed with you because it was easy, not because she wanted to. Probably true, I said. Good thing I don't have to worry about boring her anymore. He wasn't expecting that response. His face flushed red. You think this is over? You think you won? I think you're standing in a hospital parking lot, threatening a man whose wife you stole, while that man's security cameras record every word you say. I pointed to the discreet camera mounted on a nearby light pole. Smiled, Jordan. You're on candid camera. He looked up at the camera, then back at me. You son of a bitch. Probably. But I'm a son of a bitch with evidence, good lawyers, and nothing left to lose. What are you? Before he could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Tommy Rodriguez, my old partner from the paramedic days and current business associate. Excuse me, I said to Jordan, and answered the call. Nate, you need to see this. Tommy's voice was excited. I'm at the shop. Get over here now. On my way. I hung up and looked at Jordan. This has been fun, but I have actual work to do. You know, the kind where people pay me to solve problems instead of creating them. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. 20 minutes later, I was at Tommy's security shop, a converted garage where he ran his surveillance and investigation business. Tommy was a 40-year-old ex-cop with a gift for electronics and a complete inability to take anything seriously. He was also the closest thing I had to a best friend. Tell me you got something good, I said, walking into his cluttered workspace. Better than good. I got a Christmas miracle in March. He spun his computer monitor around. Remember how you asked me to keep an eye on your credit reports and bank accounts? Yeah. Well, someone's been very busy. Look at this. The screen showed a series of loan applications, all in Heather's name, all approved in the last 6 months. The amounts were staggering. Jesus, how much total? 73,000, give or take. Your sister-in-law was ambitious. Ex-sister-in-law. Right. But here's the kicker. Look at the addresses on these applications. I leaned closer. Half the loans listed Heather's work address. The other half listed an apartment complex across town. That's not her address. Nope. It's Jordan Mason's address. Your wife's boyfriend has been getting loan money delivered to his apartment. I stared at the screen. He was in on it. Up to his gym rat neck. But wait, there's more. Tommy pulled up another screen. I did some digging on Mr. Mason. Turns out he's got quite the history. 3 DUIs, 2 domestic violence charges that were dropped, and a bankruptcy from 2019. So he's broke. Broker than broke. And according to his social media, he's been living way above his means lately. New truck, expensive dinners, weekend trips to Chicago. All funded by loans in your wife's name. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. They were planning to take the money and run. That's my guess. Use your wife's credit to fund their new life together, then disappear and leave her holding the bag. Except Missy got greedy and started stealing from us directly. Which brought you into the picture sooner than they wanted. Tommy leaned back in his chair. So, what's the plan? I thought about Jordan in the parking lot, his threats and his arrogance. I thought about Heather, probably sitting in some cheap motel room, still believing her sister had been trying to help her. I thought about all the nights I'd worked late while they laughed about how easy I was to fool. We're going to give them exactly what they deserve, I said. Which is the truth, in the most public, humiliating way possible. Tommy grinned. Now you're talking my language. The next morning, I called Detective Hall and arranged to meet him at the station. I brought Tommy's evidence, along with my own documentation of the affair and the financial fraud. This is bigger than we thought, Detective Hall said, reviewing the loan documents. Mason's looking at serious federal charges if we can prove he was involved in the identity theft. Can you prove it? With this? Yeah, I think we can. The question is, do you want to press charges against your wife too? I considered it. Heather had been unfaithful, but she'd also been used by her sister and her lover. She was guilty of adultery and poor judgment, but not necessarily of fraud. Not yet, I said. Let's see how she handles the truth first. Fair enough. We'll pick up Mason this afternoon. Good, but do me a favor. Wait until after 5 p.m. I want to make sure he's had time to get comfortable. Detective Hall raised an eyebrow. Any particular reason? Let's just say I want him to have the full experience. That evening, I was having dinner at Murphy's Pub when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you're so smart? Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street. 9 p.m. Come alone. I showed the message to Tommy, who was sitting across from me. It's Jordan, I said. He wants to meet. That's either very stupid or very dangerous. Probably both, but I'm going. Not alone, you're not. He said, come alone. He also said a lot of other stupid things. I'm coming with you. At 8:45 p.m., we parked across the street from the abandoned warehouse that used to house Millfield Manufacturing. The building had been empty for 5 years, ever since the company moved operations to Mexico. It was the perfect place for a private conversation or an ambush. You sure about this? Tommy asked. No, but I'm doing it anyway. We walked across the street together. The warehouse door was unlocked. Inside, Jordan was waiting in the middle of the empty floor space, illuminated by a single work light he'd brought. I said, come alone, he called. I don't take orders from you, I replied, walking closer. Tommy stayed near the door, as we'd planned. You think you've got me figured out, don't you? I think you're a broke loser who saw an easy mark and got greedy. Jordan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to know what's funny? Heather never asked me to take the money. That was all Missy's idea. But when she offered to cut me in, I figured, why not? You had everything. Nice house, steady job, beautiful wife. What did you do to deserve all that? I worked for it. Bullshit. You got lucky. You married up and coasted. Is that what you tell yourself? It's what I know. He stepped closer. But here's what you don't know. This isn't over. Even if you get me arrested, even if you divorce Heather, this isn't over. I'll get out eventually. And when I do, I'll remember how you ruined my life. Your life was already ruined. I just documented it. We'll see about that. That's when I heard the sirens. Jordan heard them too. His face went pale in the work light. You set me up. I documented your crimes. Again. I pulled out my phone, which had been recording the entire conversation. Thanks for the confession, by the way. Really ties the case together. The warehouse doors burst open and Detective Hall entered with 4 uniformed officers. Jordan Mason, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit identity theft, wire fraud, and extortion. As they cuffed him, Jordan looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly. It is. 3 weeks later, Heather called me for the first time since she'd moved out. We need to talk, she said. Her voice sounded hollow, exhausted. Do we? Please, Nate. I know you hate me, but I need to ask you something. I was sitting in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd found her burner phone, drinking coffee and reading the morning paper. The house felt different now, cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted. Ask, did you know? About the loans, I mean? Did you know what Missy and Jordan were doing to me? I suspected Jordan was involved after Tommy found the evidence. But I didn't know how deep it went until the police arrested him. $73,000, Nate. They stole $73,000 in my name. I know. My credit is destroyed. I can't get an apartment, can't get a car loan, can't even get a credit card. The hospital fired me when the background check showed the fraud charges. I'm sorry that happened to you. Are you? Or are you glad I'm getting what I deserve? I thought about that. A month ago, I would have said I was glad. I would have felt vindicated, satisfied that karma had finally caught up with her. But sitting in my quiet kitchen, listening to her cry softly over the phone, I mostly felt tired. I'm not glad you're suffering, Heather, but I'm not going to fix it for you either. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm asking you to help me understand how we got here. You want the truth? Yes. We got here because you decided I was boring, because you thought you deserved something more exciting than a marriage that required work. Because when your sister offered you an easy way out, you took it without asking questions. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know, but it happened anyway. She was quiet for a long moment. What happens now? Now you figure out how to rebuild your life. Same as I did. Will you, could you maybe not pursue the civil suit? I know you have grounds, but I don't have anything left to take. The civil suit. My lawyer had filed it the week before, seeking damages for the financial fraud, the cost of the divorce, and emotional distress. It was mostly symbolic, since Heather was essentially judgment-proof, but it would ensure she couldn't discharge the debt in bankruptcy. I'll think about it, I said. Thank you. Heather? Yeah? For what it's worth, I did love you. I loved you enough to work late so you could have nice things. I loved you enough to trust you when you said you were with your sister. I loved you enough to give you the benefit of the doubt, even when I started to suspect. I know. I loved you too, Nate. I just, I got lost somewhere along the way. Yeah, you did. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about love and betrayal and the price of both. Then I called my lawyer and told him to drop the civil suit. Some victories aren't worth the cost. 2 months later, I was installing a security system at the new Starbucks downtown when I saw her. Heather was working behind the counter, wearing the green apron and the forced smile of someone who'd learned humility the hard way. She saw me too, and for a moment, we just looked at each other across the crowded coffee shop. Then she turned back to her customer, and I went back to my work. That evening, Tommy and I were having beers at Murphy's when Detective Hall stopped by our table. Thought you'd want to know, he said. Jordan Mason pled guilty this afternoon. 3 to 5 years, full restitution. What about Missy? 2 years plus probation. She's already served 4 months, so she'll be out in about 16 months. Good. There's something else, Detective Hall said. Mason tried to implicate your ex-wife in the fraud scheme. Said she knew about the loans, helped him plan the whole thing. I looked up sharply. And? We investigated. Phone records, bank surveillance, witness interviews. No evidence she was involved beyond being the victim. Her sister and boyfriend used her, but she didn't know about the financial stuff. I felt something loosen in my chest. Thanks for telling me. Figured you'd want to know. After Detective Hall left, Tommy raised his beer. So it's really over. Yeah, it's over. Any regrets? I thought about that. Did I regret losing my marriage? Yes. Did I regret the way it ended? No. Did I regret the revenge I'd taken? That was more complicated. I regret that it was necessary, I said finally. But I don't regret doing it. Fair enough. Tommy clinked his bottle against mine. So what's next? Next, I go home to my quiet house and my clean conscience. I sleep well for the first time in months. And tomorrow, I go back to work, protecting other people's property and peace of mind. Sounds boring. Good. I like boring. As we left the bar, I saw Mrs. Fenton across the street, walking her ancient poodle. She waved and I waved back. Some things never change, and in a world full of betrayal and broken promises, that was oddly comforting. I drove home through the quiet streets of Millfield, past the hospital where Heather and Jordan had planned my destruction, past the courthouse where their plans had crumbled, past the warehouse where Jordan had made his final, futile threat. My house was dark and peaceful. I'd left the porch light on, and it cast a warm glow over the front steps where Heather used to sit and wait for me to come home from late calls, where she'd kissed me goodbye on the morning of our wedding 12 years ago, where she'd cried the day her father died, and I'd held her until the tears stopped. All of that was gone now, burned away by her choices and my response to them. But the house remained, and I remained, and that would have to be enough. I unlocked the front door and stepped into my quiet, empty, honest home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new problems to solve. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was exactly where I belonged. In my kitchen, I made a sandwich and opened a beer. I sat at the table where I'd confronted Heather and Missy, where I'd planned my revenge, where I'd finally learned the full scope of their betrayal. the table where my marriage had died and my new life had begun. Outside, Jordan's red Camaro would never again rumble down my street at 2 a.m. Missy would never again rifle through my belongings or steal my peace of mind, and Heather would never again lie to my face while planning my destruction. I'd lost a wife, a sister-in-law, and the comfortable illusions of a 12-year marriage. But I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I could trust myself to fight back when fighting back was necessary, that I could be ruthless when ruthlessness was required, that I could protect what mattered, even when what mattered was just my own dignity and self-respect. The phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and smiled. "Mrs. Fenton, is everything all right?" "Oh, yes, dear. I just wanted to tell you, there's a young lady been asking around the neighborhood about you. Very pretty, very polite. I think she might be interested." "Is that so?" "Indeed. I told her you were a good man who'd been through a difficult time, but that you were doing much better now." "Thank you, Mrs. Fenton. You deserve happiness, Nathan. Don't forget that." After I hung up, I finished my sandwich and beer in the peaceful quiet of my kitchen. Then, I turned off the lights and went upstairs to bed, leaving the porch light on for tomorrow's possibilities. Some stories end with revenge, others end with justice. The best ones, I've learned, end with the simple satisfaction of knowing you can sleep well at night because you've been true to yourself and fair to others, even when they weren't fair to you, especially then.